I want to thank you for coming tonight for our first program connected to our exhibition, Constructing Hope Ukraine, which is on view upstairs on the ground level and on the mezzanine level. As the first exhibition of this particular work in the US, Constructing Hope Ukraine presents the work of over a dozen participants applying architectural thinking to support Ukraine's short and long-term construction efforts in the face of a full-scale invasion. Tonight, we have a great panel to dive into the Theater of Hopes and Expectations project on view in the gallery upstairs on the main floor. I encourage you all to come back to the center before the show closes at the end of the summer on September 3rd to look closely at each project in the show, and also to return on both July 10th and 25th for the 2 additional programs attached to this exhibition that the co-curators have been planning tirelessly. And speaking of co-curators, I'd like to now introduce Ashley Bigham, one of those co-curators for the Constructing Hope Ukraine show, who will kick off tonight's program. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jesse, and thank you everyone at the Center for Architecture for supporting this project. Thank you all for coming tonight. My name, as Jesse said, is Ashley Bigham. Together with Sasha Tobolnitska and Betty Reutberg, who are here in the front row, we want to welcome you to Constructing Hope Ukraine and our first conversation of the summer. The exhibition you see on the upper 2 levels of the center includes works of resilience, imagination, and inventiveness on the part of our contributors in the face of the ongoing invasion of Ukraine. The work presented showcases how architectural skills can be used as a tool to direct outrage and grief into action. It is essential to understand and learn from the ways architectural methodologies, construction practices, and design skills are used as a form of collective resistance in Ukraine. The projects in the exhibition display a variety of responses to the issues of destruction and reconstruction, which resonate beyond the war in Ukraine. We believe that the built environment plays an important role in the care and collective healing of society. We also believe that the actions of grassroots and grassroots initiatives of those exhibited here resonate beyond the Ukrainian context and engage an interdisciplinary and global audience. And on behalf of the curatorial team, in addition to the ongoing destructions in Ukraine, we recognize and stand against the killing of civilians in Palestine and the destruction of Palestinian cities, cultural heritage, and the erasure of collective memory. Constructing Hope exhibition is made possible in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. And also supported in part by the Architecture and Design Independent Project Grant Program, a partnership between the New York State Council and on the Arts and the Architectural League of New York. So we thank both of those organizations. And a very special thanks tonight to our sponsor of the evening, which is Razom for Ukraine. We are pleased to have Razom's CEO, Dor Chomiak, with us tonight to say a few words about their organization. So I'm going to pass it over to Dora. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow, it's great to be here. As a native New Yorker who is a real believer in the built environment shaping society and has seen how people's behavior changes where they are, it's great to see all of you here, and I'm excited about our conversation. I want to thank, first and foremost, the Center for Architecture for hosting the exhibit and this talk, for all the curators for taking the initiative to dream this up and put this together, and all the other fellow donors that make this possible. Razom means together in Ukrainian, and that's what we are today. And we've been around for 10 years as a volunteer organization focused on building a prosperous, sovereign, democratic Ukraine. That's what we're doing now, but because of the Russian full-scale invasion, how we do that has changed. We do that now, we do a lot of aid work in Ukraine, supporting medics on the front, and we do a lot of that work with over 400 hospitals across Ukraine, and with over 160 Ukrainian-based non-governmental organizations, much like the ones who created some of the pieces of the exhibit today. That's our aid work. Our advocacy work is twofold. We have a team now dedicated in Washington, D.C., making sure that at the federal level, the policymakers understand why continued bipartisan support for Ukraine and defending freedom is important for us all here in the United States. And I'm happy to say that the $61 billion supplemental that was stuck in Congress, we did a lot of work with a lot of organizations to help pass that. And we got some good news about an hour ago that Ukraine is now able to actually defend itself in Kharkiv by using US weapons. So it's a lot of work being done a lot of different ways. The second piece of our advocacy work is this, which is connecting Ukraine to the world and the world to Ukraine. So we want to support places and conversations where the world can hear directly from the immensely talented, incredibly resilient, and always creative people working in Ukraine, not just to solve problems in Ukraine, but solving problems of the whole planet, climate change, global food insecurity, encouraging innovation. All of these things, Ukraine has a lot to offer, and I would welcome you, sort of in closing, to think about what you can do to take action, to be involved. The first easy thing as CEO of a 501c3 nonprofit is to say, please continue to donate. There's over 200,000 people across the United States and the world who have contributed just a few $100s each, and that's how we've been able to deploy over $116 million of aid in just the past 2 years. So every bit matters. Please contribute either to our organization or to others doing work in Ukraine. 2 is continue to be curious. And I say continue because you're here, so you're already curious. So be curious about Ukraine, continue to be curious about Ukraine, ask questions. And finally, I would just ask you to invite your friends to do the same, to donate and to be curious. So thank you very much for taking the time today, for giving me a chance to say a few words. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation so we can all learn from each other and continue to be curious. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dora. So I also want to say that a lot of these projects that are part of our exhibition are run by volunteers, started out by volunteers, some of them are still volunteers, and you can support them through the QR codes that are placed in the description of each project. And we will continue this talk series with events on July 10th and July 25th, so please check the CFA website for details, and we hope that you can come. Now I'd like to introduce tonight's panelists, 2 creators from Ukraine who are featured in the exhibition, Roman Khimey and Yerema Malaschuk. They're featured in several projects in our exhibition, and they're collaborating at the intersection of visual art and cinema since 2013. Kiev-based artists and filmmakers who graduated as cinematographers from the Institute of Screen Arts in Kiev, Ukraine. They are winners of the main Pinchuk Art Center Prize in 2020 and the Visio Young Talent Acquisition Prize in 2021. Yerema and Roman are members of the Precarpathian Theater, the art collective that established the project Theater of Hopes and Expectations, which was presented at the Ukrainian Pavilion during the Venice Biennale Architectura 2023. They also curated a group exhibition on the periphery of war at the Kiev Biennial in 2023. Their work is currently on display in the Constructing Hope Ukraine exhibition upstairs. Lucas Power is a licensed architect, urbanist, historian, educator, and the founding director of the Vertical Geopolitics Lab, an investigative practice and think tank at the intersections of architecture, geography, politology, and media, dedicated to exposing intangible systems and hidden agendas within the built environment. The Vertical Geopolitics Lab, VGL, is comprised of a practice-based research and teaching team with experience at the disciplinary intersections of the applied and social sciences in architecture, geography, politology, and media, employing techniques from visual storytelling, graphic design, scenic design, exhibition design, interior design, and architectural design, with particular focus on visual material and spatial analysis and immersion. And last but not least, our moderator for tonight is Daniel Jonas Roach. He is the editor of the Architects newspaper. Previously, he co-organized a symposium entitled The Reconstruction of Ukraine, Ruination, Representation, and Solidarity, a joint collaboration between Lviv Center for Urban History, Yale University, University College of London, and the Visual Culture Research Center in Kiev. He is also an adjunct professor at Kean University, where he teaches courses related to ethics, labor history, and 20th century art and architecture. Each designer will give a short presentation, and then Dan will lead a discussion, followed by questions from the audience. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thanks for coming, and thanks the curators, Betty, Ashley, and Sasha, for this great show, and thanks Center for Architecture, and of course, thanks to Razum for Ukraine that brought us here. My name is Yerema Malashuk. I'm one of the members of Precarpathian Theater. It's an art group art group of 5, and there are also 4 members that are, some of them are in different parts of the world, between Germany, Ukraine, and we have one same thing in common, that we all grew up and have some connection to one small town in the west of Ukraine called Kolomyia, and that's why the title is Precarpathian Theater, because it's next to the Carpathian Mountains, this region. And once it's in probably in January 2022, around a month before full-scale invasion started, we had received an invitation to do a show in Vienna about a possible Russian invasion of Ukraine. And we started to work on it, but the opening date was 8th of March 2022. And once the possible invasion actually happened, we decided what to do with this exhibition. It's nothing, it will not work. We had a discussion what we actually should do. Should we just step away? Should we transform this possibility of a show into some fundraiser maybe, or just cancel it because it was not the time for art? Like 10 days, 12 days after we heard the news, after we heard the bombardment, some of us at least. And after this discussion, we agreed that we're actually going to start, we're going to do an artwork, a new artwork. And this artwork was about our movements before the full-scale invasion. It was a commentary on this kind of a closure of Ukraine because of the war to outside world, and a lot of other things. I will speak about it later during presentation about the theater of hosting expectations. So yeah, it's kind of complicated because different things and it's all mixed up. And but let me go to to talk a bit about the artwork. You saw upstairs with the houses, models of houses, and when the war started, full-scale invasion started, we all, as I mentioned, moved to Kolomyia, and not only us, but a lot of different people from all over Ukraine, and they seek refuge in this small town, and a lot of people from the city, a lot of locals started to share their houses, or country houses, cottages, or even like some offices that can be turned into living spaces. And but even before, we as an art group, we were fascinated by the architecture, this private small architecture of Kolomyia, where you could see like different shapes of design in facades or interiors, because it was we had an influence on Austro-Hungarian rule, and then also Polish modernism, and then later Soviet socialist architecture, and so on, and like some local traditional architecture. And it's all was pretty much there in the city. But now it was shared with some people from different regions, and they all moved in. And at some point, I think the locals in this small town understood that this private housing and this all private houses became actually public, and they started to share with everybody. And so this exhibition upstairs with the models is called our apartments, houses, cottages, garages, offices, and backyards. And the thing with our is it has a different meaning, because it's now like ours, not for just people who actually own it, but our in terms of like all those locals from the other towns that came there and became displaced people. I will go through the slides a bit later. So also, it's important to mention that this basically housing private properties in Kolomea, they were all basically like built from within, because it was built for themselves. People were actually taking care only about the insides, the facades. It was always something not really important, maybe because of the Soviet rule, where you had always, everything was public, you know, and when the time came that you can actually privatize things, you care so much about like some private, you care only about things inside. So what we decided to do, we decided to actually invite these people from this town, from people that moved from other towns and were staying in Kolomea to do some models of facades of the houses they stayed, maybe, or they left, or maybe they had some, you know, connection with. It was not only just displaced people, it was like some friends of friends, basically. And during that workshop, we were producing it together with them, and I think this models can reflect a lot about this maybe like creative subconscious, or not like to create this like some to say something about people, to say something they don't know. And I'm gonna go through some of the images from, I have it here, from workshops, and we did it in the spring or summer 2022. Yes, and then we had an exhibition there, and I will just also mention some links in between different works. And I think it's important to mention that it's not only our artwork of Precarpathian Theater, but there are a lot of different contributors. The owners of these models, of these houses. And this is how it all started, from the model of Ivan Bazak, a member of our group. He built it just in 2005, and then we decided to increase this idea of models into what you see upstairs. And this is a house of a family that their father built this house for them, but they left the country basically. And you know, this idea of this grandeur, big house, wasn't really relevant. And this is a house of Katerina Linek, who is a 2 times refugee, because she was living in Luhansk with her family and had to move in 2014 to Kyiv, and then later from Kyiv to Germany. And so she decided to build their house in Luhansk region, which is far east of Ukraine. It's now occupied territory. And this is some room plan from a house of a family in Mirnograd. Yes, and also this is this is a garage of Ulyanova family, and they just built it just before the invasion started, and they bought a new car, and they had some parties inside, but it was just probably a few months or weeks before Russians started to bombard Donetsk region and this near front territories. And yeah, this is Kiev region. The guys were actually hiding in it during houses surrounding this one were destroyed. They were hiding in this particular basement, so that's why they decided to build it as well. And this is some typical architecture of Kolomea, Austro-Hungarian probably, and mixed with some Soviet, where one of the displaced person was staying. She was from Kiev probably, yeah. And yeah, some other. This is a studio of an artist. She left it in Kiev because of the war and decided to build it with some small reproduction of her artworks, and also a plan of of Anton. He was actually hiding for 40 days in the basement in the occupied territory, and he described his stories through this images. Okay, it's a house in Borodyanka where family were staying and then left, and it was now later almost destroyed. The courtyard, and it was just this part was a construction, so they built this this fence also. Okay, and I don't know. Okay, and then I will switch to another project that you could see on the wall behind the houses, the models. It's a project called Theater of Hopes and Expectation, and the idea was to create a house, an institution, temporary institution in a courtyard of in the park in a forest garden in Düsseldorf. And we received money to actually build it, and the idea was to cover it with the leftovers of German culture in a way. And at that moment, we had to struggle a lot with the help to Ukraine and with some connections to the West, especially with Germany, which was not really happy to actually support or to say words against Russia. And it's now really completely changed. But at that moment, it was crucial to actually bring the awareness to Germans that it's not. It's about Ukraine. It's not about Russia. And so we built this house with the help of people and covered with the leftovers of different German theaters, of the scenography from different shows, like Wagner's Tannhäuser, some film sets, and did their different presentations. It's operatic presentations that is also here present as an understructure project, and also different shows. Just we'll quickly run through, and we were doing this presentation during this construction and events and screenings, and also another part of the workshop, but it was made with the people, with the refugees that was in Düsseldorf. It is not present there. It's a different part. This is how it looks from outside, and also a Levi Berek presentation. You can see a movie, a film about their work, and the stand also upstairs. Yes, and let me go to it's a project of Open Group. Repeat after me. The houses. And then we dismantled it, and with the help of also Levi Berek, we moved it to Ukraine and rebuilt. And the guys rebuilt it as a house for this Honchar family, which lost their home basically on 10th of March 2022. And so it's, I call it reversed ready-made, when you actually create some installation and artwork, and then it turns into a actual home. It's not just like some reflection, it's actually actions. And this idea to act, to not just to reflect and create art, but to turn into some practical thing. I think connected with this first discussion we had about art versus, I don't know, emergence or like some aid for Ukraine or something like that. As I mentioned in the beginning, where we were discussing whether should we close our idea with the exhibition and turn it to some like just actual help. So that somehow maybe finished this thing. And this is the family that is now living there. Okay, thank you for your attention. And I will pass the mic to Roman, and Roman will also tell a bit about the film, which I mentioned previously. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Irema, that introduced me. You want to show a small video that represent how this family showed the ruins of their house.
Let's play a video then.
Я виходжу от сюди, тут була бабіна кімната, потім я йду сюди, тут було зала, тут були діти, потім ще була спальня, тако сюди, комната.
Ну, 4 комнати.
На 4 було комнати.
Стояла тумбочка, столик той маленький.
О.
Тут і шафа, тумбочка.
І шафа була,
Кроваті, ну,
кроваті диван, 2 двоспальних кроваті, столики, ну, шкафа.
дві шкафи.
Що?
Ну, всередині там. Що
Телевізор.
було, то
все.
немає. Що там немає, нічого.
Що там казати, да.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks. As you understand, as Irema said, that we are not architects, and with Irema in more of our projects, we're working with moving image, we are filmmakers, but with the beginning of full-scale war, full-scale invasion, we started using modeling as more as a method, more as a subject, not as architecture in its academic perspective. And what I want to say that in our projects with Prekarpatian Theater, we work with people who moved to new territories, and 1 year ago, I have opportunity visit people who moved and back again to their homes after the occupation, and this opportunity gave me the Livy Barich organization. It's our friends. It's a group of 3 people. It's Igor Okonev, who is in civilian life, works like artist, and graphic designer. Vlad Sharapa, it's architect, and their co-partner Ksenia Karmius. They invited me share one of their expedition to the north, far north of Kharkiv region. And the Livy Barich, from the beginning of full scale, they started to reconstruct roofs. And for this moment, they reconstructed around 350 roofs. The name of Leeuwenberg means, if we translate it to English, it's left bank, and it refers to, the name refers to the tragic story of Ukraine, when different empires in different times divided Ukraine by the Dnipro River, and speculated on it. So 1 year ago, it was in May, we go to the north of the Kharkiv region, and it was like, I'm not prepared for a new artwork. Guys from Leeuwenberg invited me to make a documentation of the people who tried to live in their houses, damaged houses, and I make for myself like kind of synthetic purpose why should I document in this, because I don't want to make this like a journalist or like a regular documentarist, and I make this purpose and this kind of task for myself, and try to talk with these people only about their domestic life during the documenting. And I spent more than 6 days near the front line, and if somebody watched the film, that's why you can see a lot of tactile frames, a lot of tactile gestures, because when I talked with them only about their daily life, daily routine, for them it was really important, because usually a lot of documentarists or journalists talking with them about something, some emergency things, and that's why you can see the result of this tactile things in this film. What can I add to this? That we can say that somehow it's like continuity of our practice with Precarpathian theater, when we work with models, and then we moved to the north of Kharkiv region, and I saw how these people live here, and I captured this. And always when I started to talk about this video, about this film, about those days, I remember there are like a poetry, yeah, more like several sentences that at once said American poet Adrian Rich, and if I try to transfer it and translate into our language, it will sound maybe like they saw the ruins, they saw the damage that was done, but they took the treasures that prevail. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the introductions earlier today. Thank you to the co-curators, Ashley, Betty, Sasha, to the Bazaar for Ukraine Foundation for allowing us to be here tonight, for raising awareness about an important topic, a difficult conversation to have, but unfortunately also still a timely conversation to have. And in fact, one cannot talk about ongoing imperial colonial violence without also acknowledging the very land we as guests have the privilege to speak on today. The very land we stand on, the air that we breathe, the water that we drink is in fact has in fact been for a very long time and still is the land of the Lenape and Wapinga nations. So I'm grateful to be here a guest and for us to be able to speak at the Center for Architecture and to host us. To talk about collective memory in the case of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I'd like to begin to kind of talk about this very image that you can see here, which was captured around 80 years ago. This is during the period of the Second World War, in which the Crimean Peninsula was liberated from the Nazi German occupation. In a way, lands that were liberated, which is very much a scene that was kind of reconstructed and reenacted in 2014, 10 years ago, which is in many ways known as the kind of the Russian invasion of Ukraine as it happened. But many of you in this room also know that the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the kind of ongoing sovereignty dispute happened even years before that, with kind of disputes over natural gas extraction, pipelines crossing various lands, ongoing claims to a space within the domain of what used to be referred to as the Soviet Union. In fact, ongoing today, there's a kind of this acknowledgement of even from many Russian politicians to not even recognize that there's a difference between the two nations of Ukraine and Russia. And many politicians ongoingly refer to Ukraine as the so-called near abroad, which is a kind of Russian way of saying that Ukraine is neither the abroad nor in fact acknowledging that it is still the Soviet Union, let's say. So it is really an ongoing dispute that has been a dispute for quite a long time. I'd like to really, the kind of trope that you saw of kind of planting a flag, this imperial colonial trope of putting a flag into the ground to make a claim, is an ongoing and an historically old imperial colonial trope. And in many ways, I'd like to talk about how architecture can be an instrument, or has been for a very long time, an instrument to claim sovereignty over other polities. Recently, my lab, of which I'm the founding director, the Vertical Geopolitics Lab, had an exhibition in Toronto, not far from here, at the University of Toronto Daniels faculty, called How to Steal a Country, of which I would like to share a few moments tonight. In fact, what this exhibition did was raising awareness about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, in the sense that architecture, built objects, have often been instruments to claim space. Diplomacy is the domain of soft power, military is the domain of hard power, but there's in fact a kind of what's known in international relations speak, a gray zone, a gray area in which architecture, infrastructure have been instrumentalized to legitimize really Russian claims to Ukraine. So the exhibition here was organized in 4 sections. Each section is kind of representing and discussing a particular building type. I'm not going to talk about all of these building types. I'm just focusing on one section to give you a bit of a glimpse of how the exhibition was organized, but very much speaking to the conversation tonight about collective memory and really model making as a technique to immerse an audience of how the kind of seemingly innocuous or banal built objects that have been used to instrumentalize a claim. In fact, if you were to have seen the exhibition in Toronto, you would have noticed that actually there are very, very few moments in the exhibition where drawing, cartographic drawing, mapping has been used to discuss geopolitics. This is because we very much were focusing on the notion of kind of immersing an audience in how claims have been sought to instrumentalize on the ground. There is a kind of highbrow conversation often on geopolitics happening within the domain of kind of law, history, geography, but in fact very much concerning the collective memory of people on the ground, and very much making so-called facts on the ground. Creating facts on the ground is the domain of built objects, of architecture and infrastructure. These cartographic drawings here correspond to the 4 sections of the exhibition. I will go about these sections a bit more into detail, but the idea is also to kind of challenge geopolitics as it happened, has happened for a very long time. The idea of so-called nation-state boundaries as linear, as lines on the ground that are projected around the Earth, which is so-called sort of impermeable. Nation-state boundaries are, historically speaking, a recent idea, much more, many more times, in fact, for the longest period in time, and still ongoing today in many ways. Sovereignty is projected in a much more fluid sense, that these seemingly linear boundaries are in fact negotiated through architectural objects and punctual kind of moments. So this is to talk about kind of sovereignty in the sense of these buildings are facts on the ground. Practical actual claims to sovereignty differ from and have superseded legal formal claims to sovereignty, which is the domain of kind of law, cartography, and mapping, which the exhibition is to challenge by talking about markers. You can see here humanitarian aid. This is an immersive niche, one of the 4 niches in which we talked about how Russia has sort of portrayed a benevolent act of providing humanitarian aid, a very insidious way of providing humanitarian aid, given that it is a crisis that Russia has very much caused in Ukraine, being recognized as kind of benevolent act of humanitarian aid, as much as being recognized, seeking to be recognized for kind of constructing banks in eastern Ukraine to help Ukrainians pay out their pensions, which inevitably was a scheme to what is known as passportization, to force Ukrainians suddenly to sign up for Russian passports in order to be able to open a bank account. So you have these, again, these kind of seemingly banal minor architecture of it's just a bank, but in fact it comes with, just like humanitarian aid in this case, it comes with strings attached. It is not just a bank, it is in fact a marker of sovereignty that Russia has used to create facts on the ground. A third niche talks about telecommunications, so the idea of internet and telephone facilities that have been used to project power in Ukraine, to force Ukrainians suddenly with networks that are not working anymore, to force Ukrainians to sign up for Russian SIM cards, to use a Russian form of the internet. And very imperial colonial historically also, when looks at the kind of British Empire having laid cables around the earth to synchronize time, GMT, across the globe. One needs to remember that in 2014, with the invasion of Ukraine, one of the first things that was done by Russia was to in fact lay a cable from the mainland to the Crimean Peninsula in order to synchronize the Crimean Peninsula and to bring Crimea to literally the same time zone as Moscow, to change the time zone. I'd like to talk a little bit more, just briefly, about a section in particular, which was on a very particular type of architecture, child boarding and care facilities. This section very much talks about the forced abduction of Ukrainian children, their naturalization, and really kind of Russian assimilation or Russification in their abduction to the mainland. A small crib contains a soft teddy. The textures of bedding and curtain are warming, but the overall presence in the niche, in this exhibition niche, is stark and cold. Away from family and familiar homes, the teddy is stitched to the mattress and held in by the bars of the crib. It cannot leave. The wallpaper reflects the bars and stripes of a prison. A sheer lace curtain hints at the presence of an exterior window, an external world that cannot quite be seen from and cannot be accepted to. A nearby table contains Russian textbooks to encapsulate the mind along with the body. One of the scenes, and here it's important to mention that the 4 scenes represented in this exhibition niche have been reconstructed from open source intelligence. Nothing that you see in the exhibition, in fact, is just a kind of illustration. All of this has been painstakingly kind of reconstructed from actual media scenes, journalistic and social media. You can see this here in the sources, where we've used scene models, in fact, dioramas, to recreate events as they happen on the ground, to kind of decode, and you can see the kind of model-making techniques that are being used here to decode, to deconstruct, to explain to an audience how it is these seemingly banal, minor-built objects to really instrumentalize the invasion. I'd like to read here an immersive text that we wrote in order to accompany this particular scene as it relates to collective memory. The bus arrives, somewhere warm for the summer, away from the gunshots, shelling, and blackouts. Parents aren't there, but that's not unusual for a school trip. The teacher mentioned that they were somewhere warmer, somewhere by the water, joking around on the bus, singing songs. That's not unusual for a school trip. They leave the bus in single file. It's just like a school trip, except the teachers say it isn't safe to go back home and that one is to forget about home. It's a free holiday, after all. In a truly fantastic facility, there are classrooms, dining rooms, playgrounds, football fields, games rooms, pool tables, and spas. There's a beach where children can swim in the sea, under the sun, in the freshest air available. This is a place where they are taken to forget about home, to take their mind off the war that has taken them right here to the sanatorium. To forget about home, they wonder, will they go home? And really, this is to kind of show that these often, in fact, former kind of Soviet sanatoriums have been instrumentalized to abduct Ukrainian children, to naturalize, to so-called re-educate them. Something that has been shown in this very scene, in which Russian textbooks are suddenly used to teach Ukrainian children not only in their native language, and not anymore in their native language, but in fact in Russian. Another scene here shows the kind of so-called military patriotic reenactment that these Ukrainian children have also been forced to undertake in the context of these so-called schools. Maria Masha Lyova-Belova is smiling at children. She peers into smiling babies' faces and doesn't see a war. She sees smiling children. Naturally, orphans are the saddest of children, but today they are all smiling because Masha is here. She reaches into a crib to stroke the cheek of a sleeping baby. They're orphans because they are without parents, or are in the care of the orphanage because they are wards of the state. It is as if your parents did not die or give them up, but were erased under the heavy ink of a black marker pen or deleted from a database with the stroke of a key. But some parents are not dead. They are merely redacted. Masha's presence reverses the situation. Just for today, under the lenses of these cameras, they're all her children. Her hand touches the edge of a crib by which a toddler holds themselves upright, and she waits a moment for the photographer to capture it, Masha and the child not quite touching. So this last scene I wanted to share here is essentially where you can see that Ukrainian children forcibly deported to Russian-controlled territory were categorized as orphans by Russian authorities, regardless of their actual status prior to deportation. And in this case, the Russian presidential commissioner, Lyova-Belova, inspected Ukrainian infants deported from Kherson to promote their adoption into Russian families to be raised as Russians. In this way, I'd like to really, I'm looking forward to a conversation we hope to have tonight about kind of also the connections between model making and collective memory. You can see that all of the evidence that was reconstructed in these dioramas and these scene models were an effort no smaller than to kind of come up with a new analytical technique of how we can kind of decode power in the built environment, how there can be kind of built environment power literacy to see how it is seemingly minor, banal built objects in the form of architecture, not just diplomacy, not just warfare on the other hand, but this kind of gray zone where we can neither say, yes, it is above the threshold of diplomacy, but it is also still below the threshold of what we know as warfare. And I think it's really important to kind of raise awareness about these insidious acts, given that we are in a center for architecture, to have an agency to really question what architecture is and how it often is instrumentalized. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. We're now going to begin the discussion section. This being a night about memory, there's a really interesting quote that I wanted to kick things off with by Susanna Radstone and Bill Schwartz. "We are witnessing an unprecedented politicization of memory, such that public engagement with memory is taking on new and more complex forms. We need to move from the general or the absence of memory, to the concrete, to historically specific formations of remembering and forgetting, in which each is articulated in the other. Identities, individual and collective, are formed and reformed through narrative and history and through adversity. So this quote, when I was looking at everybody's work, made me think of what we'd be talking about tonight. So to start, my question is for everyone. How, in your opinion, is memory political in the context of contemporary Ukraine? How do each of your projects engage with memory, or in the context of this discussion, constructing memory? And last, why is memory so important to talk about right now, when it's so hard to sort of think about the future?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Yeah, I think it's now all about memory pretty much in Ukraine, since Russia is stealing the memory, and we are now struggling to somehow keep it, to preserve it, and you can see it through the how Ukrainians are now trying to identify themselves, and probably this is something not really common to hear in a lot of Western countries, where like identity politics and this national awareness is something kind of old school, I would say, if not to say worse. But with Ukraine it's a bit different, probably because when somebody's trying to steal your identity, your nationality, you absorb your nationality, you start to, you know, counter-react, you start to fight to preserve it, and maybe it's rather about the identity, but also regarding the memory and creating the memory. We realized ourselves in the situation that what we actually do now will affect the memory in general, and even these small steps. And I think like these small steps and connection between people, this is how we form the memory right now. This is how memory is will be then shaping the politics in the future.
I just add that to the words of that Yerema said, that once Ukrainian artist Nikita Kadan asked the question, what is the habitus of visual language in Ukraine, visual language of artists. And I think it's, if we try to transform it more to the text that can describe it, I think it's about, we can say that it's a memory about lost memory. Memory of the lost memory.
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity, in fact, to kind of tie this conversation to the built environment, to often kind of architectural objects or moments. And one that comes to mind really is this kind of ongoing debate, the idea of kind of Soviet memorials in Ukraine. That's a conversation that has been ongoing for quite a long time now, and it's interesting to note that in fact during as Russian forces have been advancing in the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it's important to remember and to recognize that in fact Russia has reconstructed and constructed anew Soviet Lenin and Stalin statues, to really kind of reshape a narrative that Ukraine in previous years has come to terms with in a way, and had already a kind of conversation. And the idea of narrativization and to kind of construct these memories as forces have been advancing is kind of really a metaphor for kind of the conversation we're having tonight, I think.
Excuse me, for one more thing. It's really like the topic in Ukraine, and you brought said about the memorials, these monuments of Lenin and etc. For instance, when we speak about the decommunization processes we had in Ukraine, and about this process that we should destroy Lenins, and most of intellectual community in Ukraine, me as well, we were pretty much against it before 2022, the full-scale invasion, because we were like, why should you fight with the history, right? It's the history, you should preserve it, like you should recontextualize it. But what really happened after Russia occupied part of Ukraine, that this Lenin was actually alive. He was actually alive as a monument or as a person, whatever, I don't know, but they bringing them back. They were like finding those Lenins on the, somewhere in the trash, and then bringing them and putting them back on this monument. So it's like, and I was like, wait, we should somehow like look into it a bit more precise, into a lot of things, as well as dehumanization. But of course, sometimes when officials in Ukraine are doing this severe dehumanization and destroying some really amazing art objects and monuments, this is also a different topic of discussion. Thank you.
So for my next question, I wanted to focus on the act of model making itself. So while we were preparing for this discussion, Lucas actually said something very interesting, that in discussions about geopolitics, we tend to, as far as representation goes, we lean on cartography, we lean on kind of ethereal, discussions about theory, what sovereignty means. But what we have here tonight is a very tactile way of representing very complex stories through model making. And so my next question is for Lucas. Why is it that this mode of representation of model making is unique in geopolitics? Why don't we see more of it?
Right. I mean, disciplinarily speaking, how actually the kind of discourse as it happens by policymakers, there's training in law, in politics, which tends to be the domain of written texts, of agreements, of oral kind of agreements that are being made, or of cartographic drawings, of maps that are being drawn. But in fact, these texts and these drawings, they do refer to built to the kind of facts on the ground. When I showed an image earlier today, I mean, one cannot claim a space without also kind of, it's a bit like I go to a library, I'd like to reserve a spot in the library to sit at a desk, and chances are I put my phone there or my book to hold, like, to mark the space as a placeholder, or we've had it here, some people arrived early and put a scarf or a kind of held something in place, right? And not unlike, in fact, it is built objects, buildings, infrastructure that are being used to kind of as markers on the ground. And one cannot just declare, well, this is mine, without also kind of use it or lose it. And this is the really controversial kind of discussion to have. Often architects are really complicit, and people don't necessarily recognize this in policy making and geopolitics. It is actually, we need to, I think, reclaim in our field the kind of domain of geopolitics in architecture, because these are literally kind of built objects and buildings on the ground. And immersion and kind of model making really is what brings this to an audience, because one does not need to be an expert, in the sense one does not need to know about the jargon of the domain of kind of diplomacy or military to talk about violence. Violence can come in many forms. Language, visual, material, spatial language, really.
Can you maybe just repeat the question, because it's probably a rather architecture discourse.
No. It's I think that, just to zoom out a little bit, when we talk about reconstruction, we think at the scale of 1-to-1. It's about rebuilding somebody's home as quickly as possible. But I think this is more of a segue to the question I wanted to ask you. Can you tell us a little bit about what happens when you're working with somebody who's been displaced and they're thinking through memory? So the scene where the little girl is thinking about where the wardrobe was, that was chilling, and I was thinking a lot about it. But what happens when you're working alongside next to somebody and they're rebuilding a space that they're so familiar with? Is it therapeutic? Is it what are just some of the vignettes that we can?
Yeah, first of all, of course, it's like, how do we work? We don't really want to engage much, I would say. Like, we don't want to bring back the memories in terms of questioning how does it feel to like recall this thing. We just like we pretend that we are just doing our job in terms of like, okay, show me where the refrigerator was, show me where the fridge was, show me where the bed was, and this is what you do. We don't engage in like maybe something specific was like, so we don't want to I don't know, re-traumatize them, and yeah, this is the first thing. So I even don't want to verbalize these things much, because it's this is what is shown. You can see it. You can see the models and even those stories behind. As we spoke previously with Sasha, that we didn't want to show here the stories of these people much in the exhibition, because it's something too literal, and something can stay just as a model or a video in that case,
As you said, architecture as it is.
Yeah,
I really like that. Yeah.
I think we can say that we use modeling, architecture modeling, more like a tool that we try not to deconstruct with this tool. I think it's more about not to dissolve, not to like expose, as it's popular. I don't know, last 10 years in our generation of artists. Yeah, for us it's more about to construct, not to dissolve the real, but to construct the real, maybe even in the first time in our situation in Ukraine.
I mean, it's interesting actually when one looks at the kind of conversation that we're having tonight. The model making, perhaps in your project, is a bit is used, one could say, projectively in the way of kind of projecting memories, whereas in the project that I showed earlier, it's about analytical model making to kind of read. Whereas here it's also about projecting hopes, and that's, I think, an interesting kind of juxtaposition.
Yeah, and just as contrast, before I saw everyone's presentations tonight, when I knew that we would be talking about modeling, I automatically thought of Eyal Weissman's work with forensic architecture, because they were novel they still are, but for a long time, of digital reconstruction of actual sites that have been affected by war. But I think what we see here tonight is a very new sort of approach and reinvention of the model compared to Eyal's work.
Yeah, I think you're more familiar with forensic architecture practice than we do. Okay, well, it's an interesting thing that you mentioned, that yeah, forensic architecture, they're doing this research and they're really good at it, and also the work that is present there, also the guys from Center for Center for Special Technology, they also did this work with the help of forensic architecture. And there is something fascinating in this reconstruction of the crime scenes, and like in your project, when I look at the sign of this Russian Federal Bank, and this design, this how it looked like, it says more than like the information that they asked Ukrainians to pay bills in Russian rubles. It's more, it's working for me way more when I see this ridiculous logo of their bank, like already updated. Not like as we imagine that it's like from Soviet Union. It's not anymore. It's brand new. It's like some good, like not good, but like not really good designers, but contemporary designer with some I don't know, Tumblr or like some references. He did it, And this is when I think about it. It makes me like, it strikes me way more than the information. And
thank you. I think different from the reference that you just mentioned, the work that we've been trying to do really is not so much about kind of reconstructing something for a single narrative, to bring to court, to raise awareness and to hold accountable. Yes, there's of course also that ethical component, for sure. The kind of raising awareness and critique of ongoing imperial colonial violence. But at the same time, I think much more at the core of the work is the idea that something one object can be interpreted in multiple ways. Even the idea, I'll bring a very concrete example, an orphanage, kind of child boarding and care facility, by the Russian government has been referred to as a place in which children are being evacuated to. Whereas we know that another a more ethical way of phrasing that would be it's actually a place in which children are being held abducted. And the same object can be narrativized in multiple different ways. So that's really about kind of raising awareness that, and there's even just briefly a photograph taken during the Second World War of St. Paul's Cathedral, where it looks like it's in ashes, and the same image has been shown both in the Nazi German newspaper and in the British Empire newspaper at the time. Two different interpretations, one an interpretation of victory, and the other one an interpretation of we're still strong in defiance. So it's really important for everyone to be able to kind of read not only text, images, but really objects.
I want to open also the conversation to the audience. Sophie here has a microphone, so we want to, take the last few minutes of this talk, I'm really enjoying the conversation, but I know that our audience is very engaged and probably has a few questions as well, so I would love to, yes, right there.
Thank you so much for your presentations and also for the wonderful exhibition. I'm really curious about the way that the mundane works through all of the projects that we've seen. Something that always really strikes me, for example, about Ilya Kaminsky's poetry is he really puts everyday life in the face of violence, and how, in a way, the act of everyday life is to try and reassemble the sort of dignity of the mundane over and over again. But in the work of How to Steal a Country, you also see the weaponization of the mundane in the bank, in the internet, in childcare. So I'm curious if each of you would talk about the way that sort of everyday life, just the action of sort of putting together the dignity of everyday life, is at play in your projects.
I think it makes one immediately think of references like really philosophical references like Hannah Arendt's Banality of Evil, or international relations and visual international relations, which is a field. There's also a conversation about the idea of banal nationalism. When one thinks of how a country is being made and what its kind of symbolic paraphernalia are that are being used to make a country, well, maybe one needs an anthem, a currency, well, coins and notes, a flag, all these kind of seemingly banal kind of visual material aspects one can extend really to kind of objects and architecture. So it is the everyday actually that one needs to discuss very much as a form of violence.
Thank you for your question. We, in our practice with Roman, in video practice, films that we do, we always work with mundane, with something banal, with everyday environment and spaces. And here in this, in the models and in the workshop in general, I think we also somehow weren't really strict on who should do it or how should it look like. I mean the objects. So it was like a process, and we enjoyed the most like simple, I would say, like, or like a typical architecture. We enjoyed to see this like random houses that they were building, and probably this when you oppose the aggressor with such a small like gestures that was building these small houses, and this is how you kind of you kind of create this basically defense through this simple connection in between people and this work that they do together, and how you not even defend yourself, is how you connect different regions from the country, different people that happened to be living together during those hard days at the very beginning of the invasion. So I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but probably this connection through the simple things, for simple model making, this is something that we achieved, and I did enjoy being a part of it, actually.
I have a question that I hope builds on the last question. Thinking about model making, there's a lot of ways to do a model. Architects know this for sure. One of the things that's fascinating about the models that I've seen both the sort of projects that, one up on screen and one that's upstairs and behind us, is there's a real fascination similarly with the details. There's the ribbed paneling, and there's, all of the windows in the houses that are upstairs are modeled and have similar sort of panes and things like that. And I wonder about models then in relationship to maps and cartography, which are often big swings and sort of generalizations and abstract on purpose. And I wonder about the model's potential to make something, I think it's been mentioned, literal or real or immersive, to be in it and make people see it and experience, the truth of, or what the model is putting forward as the truth. And so I just wonder if you guys could talk about that a little bit, the immersive quality of models and being in something versus seeing a map of something, or, so.
I think, in fact, not unlike making a drawing, when one is very much the process of making a model is also to think about what matters. What do I need to pay attention to in terms of detail? Because similar to a map is in fact a kind of reduction of reality. It can never be a complete picture because it's always an abstraction. Models work quite similarly, difference being that they're in 3 dimensions immersively. So I think that's also really what strikes me about your project, the kind of process of making the model itself. I mean, some people might also refer to as therapeutic, but also as research and as archiving. It's fascinating how the process shapes the project, even more so than the output, I would say.
Yeah, and I want to add that why artists more and more choose architecture as a tool. I think it's because in architecture, much more than in another method, we have currency, yeah, and kind of compromise, and that's why it's some opposite side of the individual practice of contemporary artists. When you make what you want, and in general, world became more and more about compromise and currency. It sounds much more than, I don't know, last 30 years.
Also, interesting story when guys received these models, and Sasha found inside of one of the houses a map that we used to we asked to draw each participant, but then we decided to leave this idea where they draw the route of escape they took from the territory that was endangered. And so it was inside. Somebody hid it inside of this private map, hide it inside of this model. And also regarding the maps versus models, we at the beginning of my presentation, I said that we had this exhibition in Vienna that we decided to do afterwards, after the invasion. It was actually our personal travels a year before the invasion until the very beginning, which all of the members of the exhibition took. And we were drawing it on top of the Soviet encyclopedia, like this, huge book with different maps about coal industry, chemical industry, or communist revivals in every single town. Yeah, there was a statement of private mapping on top of this, politicized maps. So probably there can be some maps that are also like I don't know, not about like this squeezing as you mentioned, the landscape. I don't know, like.
We may have time for maybe one more audience question. I also want to leave some time. Maybe many of you came straight down and didn't get a chance to kind of go back up through the exhibition. So maybe we'll take one more question, then we'll have some time for people to kind of filter back up before we have to end tonight. Is there one more? Yeah, Nina. So yeah, she's got the mic.
I have a few questions, of course, but one that I'm really interested in is how does this work, do you feel, contribute to what could be the future everyday monuments after the war? Because I've actually been, by chance, I have it on my screen, I just finished reading a book by photographer and professor at Ithaca College named Nicholas Molnar. I don't know if any of you know his work. It's a beautiful book where he talks about how photography's changed and the everyday photograph, and how everybody's been writing about this, but this was, I think, 10 years ago already, and how the photograph has changed in the way we look at monuments. So I'm really curious, this fits in so strangely with that idea, and I'm wondering if you think about that, like, or is it too hard to think about beyond?
The monuments, yeah, it's a topic as well. There are a lot of different presentations about this or that monument in Ukraine, about the war, and it's always a question. It's such a huge topic that I don't even know how to start it, and maybe. And yes, as you mentioned about photography, this is the most photographed war ever in the world since the invention of photography, and it changed. Some even say it's a war of images. That this is actually not happening, like it is happening, but what matters is what is happening in the images. You know, whether you will how many images Russia produce, how many images Ukraine produce, and how we can fight with these images. It sounds absurd, but it's actually is like that. And I would maybe say that once we had this together with Roman, we were working on a monument. It was like we were shortlisted to present an idea for the monument of for Holodomor. It's a Ukrainian famine in and the idea, what we came across that we saw in the museum in Melitopol, this is a south of Ukraine, which is already occupied territory by Russia, and we saw this image of the family, of a mother and daughter. You found it in the museum, yeah. It's an image from 1933 during the Holodomor, where there were an image of a mother, daughter, and in front of them there was a coffin with a small child inside, and and we were wondering why did they took it, like what is like why should somebody taking a picture with somebody, obviously a relative, in a coffin? But we realized that at that moment their father was working at the Belomor Canal somewhere deep Russia. He was sentenced there, and so they went to the funeral and came through the photography saloon and took this picture as a proof that the child is dead. And it's kind of a sad story, but what I mean is that it was a document. First of all, it was a document of this horrible event, and we wanted to the idea was to put it in the square, this exact picture, and to somehow preserve it, to say that this is actually happened. You cannot speculate on it. And this proof is not for the humanity; it's a proof for the father, like a super private image. So, yeah.
Just add that with this photography, we don't need a monument because it's so.
I think That's a very powerful note to end on. Very powerful anecdote. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just again want to thank you all for coming. Thanks especially to our panelists, two of which, of course, traveled from Ukraine to be here tonight, and Lucas came from Toronto to be here tonight. So we're really, really thankful for also the time that you've given, in addition to the amazing work and the ideas that you've put forward, and also to the engagement, the wonderful questions, and again to the Center for Architecture for hosting us. Dan, thank you for your excellent questions that started us off. And so again, we want to take a few moments. Please come and say hello. Ask additional questions of any of the panelists that you have more. And also please, as you walk out back to the street, take a moment and absorb some of the other beautiful projects, important work. And again, as Betty said, there are QR codes next to each project if you want to learn more about many of the wonderful groups doing the nonprofit work. The grassroots organizing, and also Razom also is an excellent resource for helping Ukraine and making an impact. So thank you so much.